I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to the Town of Colonial Beach Planning Commission regular meeting, Thursday, October 20th, 2017. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. Before we approve the agenda, I'd like to make an announcement that we'd like to publicly give our thanks to Mr. Bob Busick, who was our 7th member of the Planning Commission and absent tonight. This is the end of his term and he is not renewing, and so we will have a vacancy on the Planning Commission and look forward to applicants in the upcoming months. If you are interested in joining the Planning Commission, there's an application that you can get with Kelly De Jesus in the planning department at the town, and fill it out and send it to her and she will get it to us. We consider anybody in the community and appreciate all input, so thank you for that. Also, we would like to thank Mr. Brendan McHugh for his public service to the town of Colonial Beach for 4 years now, and he will be leaving us, and this will be his last Planning Commission meeting. So we really just thank you for your service and everything you've done. And we do have a card for you also. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you. Okay. The approval of the agenda. Do any Planning Commission members have any changes or modifications to the agenda that was printed today?
I want to get some clarification on some county council actions that relates to the CIP, so I didn't know who that would be addressed.
We can address that under committee report.
Okay.
I'd also like to add a follow-up on our goals under the committee reports as well, as that's been, for the last 3 meetings, people have been progressing on each of those items, and I'd like to get an update on that. I also have a small addition under other topics, and I'd like a consensus on, and I'll bring that up at that time. It doesn't change the agenda, I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay. All in favor of approval of the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First up is public comment on Planning Commission matters that are not on the agenda. If anybody in the audience has public comment on anything that's not already up for public comment today, then now is the time to come forward. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Peter Farney. I live at 3419 Riverview Drive here in Colonial Beach. I am speaking as an individual and not related to any organization with which I may be associated. I'm concerned that there appears to be no forward progress in planning a permanent community center, even though this idea has given some priority in the current CIP, and it's prominently mentioned in the desirability of a community center in the comprehensive plan. The present community center now has never looked physically better than it has in the past 25 or 30 years, if ever. But this property at 717 Marshall Avenue is not the ideal permanent location for our community needs. 2 years ago, I presented to the Planning Commission an analysis and comparison of properties that were available and appropriate that could be used for a permanent community or a civic center. Since then, I have not been privy to any forward progress or planning in this regard. At the present time, for many reasons, the property at 315 Douglas Avenue is still the best spot for a community, for a civic center to include governmental offices, the police department, and a community center. This, as you know, is the old elementary school property, or School Hill. This property, as well as other green spaces in our town, have been put up for sale. and we may lose these valuable properties to green space forever. The town-owned property at 700 Colonial Avenue could well serve the same purpose for a civic center, but as you know, it has some developmental problems. This property, as well as the property across the street, which is 719, also known as the Repo lot, is also a good property for a civic or community center, but we don't own that, and I understand the fiscal problems of acquiring another property. So, what's the point of my discourse? I realize that it is not possible at the present time to have a civic center, community center. But what I'm looking for is the long-term planning and development for the designation of a property that could serve this purpose. If no one plans for 5 years or 10 years in the future, these properties that we have available to us now, Eleanor Park, 315 Douglas Avenue, 700 Colonial Avenue, may very well be sold, and the town will very well find itself in the position of accepting what's left over when it is time and appropriate for a civic center. So the reason for my visit here is to urge you on the Planning Commission to urge the town council to get off the stick and at least designate a property that we're going to use for this purpose in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Is there any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment at 5:42 p.m. Next up is the approval of the September 2017 regular meeting minutes. Does anybody have any additions or changes to them? No? I don't have one. Okay, all in favor of approving them as written, say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Approved. Next thing on the agenda is committee reports, and before we begin that, I like to thank Mr. Farney again for his public comment. One of the goals and objectives of one of the committees that we have formed is public outreach, and we very much appreciate your input. And we also are going to provide follow-up to it. And I do task Ms. Olson as part of, and Mr. Nelson as the public outreach committee to make sure that we follow up on your concerns.
Thank you.
May I make a statement?
Sure.
Isn't it appropriate then that we consider future land use as our goal for the future? Because we don't have real plans for all the land that we have in this area, and we don't have a plan. And if we don't develop a plan soon, Mr. Farney's comment is true. It's going to go out.
I do believe that public land use and the future land use map and updating the future land use map in congruence with our comp plan is a pivotal time right now because of all this property for sale. So I think that the comments tonight are have a very important timing to what is going to happen in the next year of development in Boynton Beach. I agree. And that can be a goal, I think, for us in the next year as we've followed up on our goals this year. Maybe that's our next turn, maybe that's our next phase. Okay, as far as committee reports go, I'll start with the Public Outreach Committee because I think the CIP probably has more.
Yeah, I just did some checking today on our numbers. We have 290 followers on our Facebook page, but our last posting, which was just yesterday, was just at 500 reach. But the one I had sent out the week before, Norfolk County Council had 1,500.
Excellent.
Number. I was pretty stunned. But average 3 to 5 people will comment on my post, and I try to respond back to them as generically as I can on behalf of all of you. But I'm starting to feel pretty good that we're starting to get some interaction compared to the number of homes on next door. It's not a large percentage, but at least we're getting someone's attention out there. They're paying attention where they haven't been.
Yes. Well, it's a whole nother format too.
The other thing I was charged with doing was to try to come up with a process for follow-up to public comments, because I know that's been a concern I've had the last few years. People come up, they make comments, and then it just kind of goes out to the ether, unless we're having a very specific discussion where we ask people to comment. So I have been talking to a couple of folks in other communities to see what they do, and it seems most I've come up with to date is pretty much this way everywhere. But I've got an idea for a process that involves starting at least with having a sign-in and email to people, because there are conversations that may not happen in this meeting tonight around your issue, but definitely will be coming up. And I would like to be able to at least get back to people, thank them for their comments. This is what I heard, and then keeping track of what people know when those come up again.
So I'm keeping track of Mr. Marty's, his analysis that he gave us 2 years ago when we were looking at our future land use map, that we don't forget that that's a part of, that analysis was part of the conversation.
So I'm still looking for a process. I haven't found it yet. So we may just have to make up our own.
Okay. I love being a trendsetter. No. Okay. The CIP, capital improvement plan.
I understand the plan passed, but what does that mean, Mr. Della, in relationship to expediting the plan?
Well, as you know, the plan ideally would be used to inform our budget. Fortunately, our budget passed months ago. And so I believe as you know, most of our high priority items are funded by the sale of property. And so we're kind of in a circular movement right now. Obviously, the things that we can go forward with, we will, like the repaving of the roads and the extra $150,000 for paving of the roads. We're going forward with that. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the other items. Any other items we'll be able to go forward with. We've completed the funding of the new school.
Yes.
Those are the two items that come to mind for me anyway right now. But if you recall, looking at that sheet, the vast number of our high priority items were all being funded by sale of property.
And town, yes.
Yeah.
My concern is multifold here. I walked over by Robin Park today, and there is another chunk of land out of the dirt going into the water there. And the Robin shoreline does concern me, and I'm sure it concerns many other citizens. And I can see no other priority when it comes to shoreline, because we are a shoreline town. And I give a plus for that, but I am concerned about things like the streetscape and things like that, because in our comp plan of 2009, it states that these are actual things that we should have done. And I am really concerned about that. I am making a folder of all the capital improvement dialogue and discussion, and it's been an eye-opener for me, because we've gone through multiple steps to get to this point. And now we're at this point, and money is a big object, and I understand it always will be. Do we not have a capital improvement fund for the town?
We do, and I apologize for not knowing the amount that remains in that fund. I know we use approximately, well, I won't say approximately, I believe about 50% of those funds in order to pay for the last portion of the school. Now, we plan to reimburse those funds at some point, but the amount we have in there, I want to say 250, but I'm just not sure about that.
I think it might be closer to 300.
300,
right around that
somewhere
number.
around there, yeah.
And I do, I agree with you, a lot of these items are related to property sale funding. However, in particular, the Robin Grove shoreline project is not. So that is something that could have progress at this time, and maybe those are the things that could be focused on while we don't have that, while we're replenishing that fund, focusing on the items that have grant opportunities associated with them.
So we intend to get grant for that. We haven't
Yes.
received the grant money as of yet.
No,
We haven't officially applied.
we
for
haven't
that.
applied for it
Okay,
yet,
so
and, and that's my concern now with that Brendan's leaving. My timeline for the CIP is really difficult to see. And, I can just voice that openly because we worked so hard on that for the past 3 years. And I just ask you to convey that.
Yeah, I will, and when you come to the council meetings, I raise the issue of the CIP and have for the
I
last
know,
several
I know,
months.
yeah,
My God,
I
I've
know.
tried to get some
I
traction
know.
with that.
I understand, but
But it seems to be always overcome by vets, so, other things are thrown in front of it. And, quite frankly, I'll be the first one to admit, that CIP should have been approved along with or before the budget.
well, hopefully in the new booklet that I am preparing, you will see the timeline is page 1. And we are 5 months behind the timeline. So hopefully next year we will not do that. The other, when are you discussing the conflict? Is that for the policy?
Yes, we can discuss comp plan, but Pam has a question.
Yes.
I was trying, I didn't get a chance to go back and look at this, but somehow in the back of my mind, I have that while the comp plan, or the CIP is past this fiscal year, the projects, or money from the projects are allotted next fiscal year because they come out of that fund, CIP. So it's approved a year ahead from when it's spent.
They should have approved the CIP before the budget.
Okay.
And it is 5 months behind
So
the
they should have
budget.
approved it for
Yes.
the last fiscal
Yes,
year,
correct.
for this fiscal year.
Correct.
So we have 5 months less to start now to get a new CIP for next year approved before the next year's budget. And that has been, and we were on time.
We
Here.
were, this year we were
So-
perfectly on time. We finished by,
That will be our goal again this next year,
Okay,
to be on
and then-
time again.
Just as an extension of that, until the town council sets a priority then that we're going to do the next step for the Robin Grove, staff can't even begin to try to get bids or look for grants or what? Can someone?
I think that's-
I guess I'm confused as to why we would allow anything to stand in our way of pursuing a grant.
Right, correct. And it's a bifold thing. Staff comes across opportunities sometimes for some of the items on the CIP. And sometimes priorities that are lower happen first because opportunities present themselves and staff finds a grant available or that particular year something's being funded or however it is. And then that gets brought to council as an opportunity for them to accomplish something on the CIP. Sometimes these things are pushed by council themselves for staff to focus on and to find the money for it and accomplish. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
I can ask a question, and I think some of the conversation about what I'm about to ask you about took place before I came on the planning commission, but do I understand correctly that the planning commission has given advice to council on how to dispose of or what to do with properties that are like on North Irving and on the boardwalk? Is that correct? That I guess I'm wondering why the town hasn't tried to market those properties. They have gotten our advice. Is that correct?
That's correct, and there are 7 outstanding planning commission items on the town council agenda that have not been addressed yet.
As a realtor, I have people that are interested in 2 of those properties, and it would be easier if they were really actually for sale. And I don't know why they're not for sale, because frankly, having businesses come into town to occupy these buildings that are otherwise falling down, deteriorating day by day, seems to me could be a huge catalyst for the economic development of this town.
And refund the capital improvement.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great. Okay, before, is there anything else? Before you go into the comprehensive plan, I just would like to say that we should bring up the timeline of the CIP and begin work on that again now.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, good. And
Everybody will have a booklet next time.
excellent. Look forward to that. Okay, would you like to move to the
Yes.
comprehensive plan? And I have a follow-up on it also.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Robin, for providing us that information from other towns. I was very impressed with the town who hired Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler was, as you know, and I don't know whether you've been to the course, was the main person behind the land use course that we all took to become people on the commission. Michael Chandler's proposals in that survey were perfectly matched with Colonial Beach. And when I read the survey, I thought to myself, this is what people are asking for. And I'd like to say that having read all of them and looked into their websites, I think that Michael Chandler offers us a big opportunity for doing our chapter 1 of our comp plan, which absolutely needs updated. You know, everybody looked at the housing section, but we don't realize the urgency of the changes that have taken place in Colonial Beach. And I think the revision of that part of the comp plan would help people to realize more effectively what's happened in Colonial Beach.
So just to explain to the audience who did not receive my email, I did send out I was tasked with one of our goals as a planning commission is to update our 2009 comprehensive plan, because here we are about to approach 2018, and by the time we actually can fund an update for it, it will probably be 2019, and it will be 10 years out of date. During that time in which we have had massive storm events, also burning down of a school, a rebuilding of a school, and multiple properties that will be sold and developed at this point. So it'd be pretty important to update that and make sure we're still going in the same direction that we had planned for in 2009. So planning for the future as a planning commission, I was tasked with coming up with a cost analysis for what it would be to update our comprehensive plan. I did reach out to Land Studios, who we had not have a relationship with anymore currently, but also with Michael Chandler and also other towns that are currently updating their comp plans, all doing the same thing that we're trying to do. And there was a lot of good information, and one of the core things that is done when you update your comprehensive plan is a public survey to everybody, not just residents, but business owners and weekenders and everyone that helps support our economy on where we see the future of this town going. And so this update is fairly expensive, and I did think though that the survey examples have questions already laid out that can be applied to Colonial Beach. And so if we do want to move forward with doing our own survey in order to at least retrieve some data, we don't need to make up the questions. The questions are there, they're publicly posted from these other towns that have hired major firms to do this. And it's very possible to at least get some feedback in the meantime ourselves, I think, number one. Number two, the cost analysis for updating our comprehensive plan completely, not just chapter one, but the whole thing, which is really ultimately what needs to be done and what needs to be budgeted for, is between $175,000 and $300,000. So this is not a cheap task. If we can do some of the research ourselves, and you know, we're a smaller town than these other towns, maybe it will be less. But we need to get on board with this now so that we can make sure that we don't go to 2025 without having a plan in place that's relevant anymore. So that's important.
Excuse me, Robin, just so I get the number right, it's 175 to 300.
That's correct.
Just make sure I heard it right.
Mm-hmm.
Is this including all of those people you asked, that you sent to us?
So, the actual firms want more information before they will give us a number. So these are numbers that other towns have gotten to do it. These are the bids from
Okay.
other towns, instead of a number specifically for us. So we would have to talk to them in more detail about what we're looking for in order to get an actual number from the other firms.
At what point would the, I'm thinking of the downtown Colonial Beach, where we actually had a group of citizens that came in, and we went through a series of questions as they related very much to the comp plan projects that had not yet been prioritized. Would any of that be a base for some of that? We also have 25% of our businesses replied, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we only had 100 to go after. 25% replied to the business survey. Can any of that data be incorporated without having to spend money to recollect the same information?
Yes, I think all of that data would be at least considered. I don't know how much of it they would use that would be applicable. However, I think if we can do one of these surveys and we do it to the formula of a firm, then maybe that would be quite applicable in cost saving. Also, I just want to request that we find out what we paid for the 2009 comp plan, and so if that's possible, going to research that, because that may be a better comparison as well based on our size. And so I'm hoping the numbers are coming less for a town that's much smaller than anything I could find comparably that's updating it right now.
Yeah, I have a question. Who decides what needs to be in the comprehensive plan? What governing body, or is this?
So the comprehensive plan is generally managed by a planning firm that does multiple meetings with the public, multiple meetings with the town
I
council.
understand that's a process, but the question is, who decides what is mandatory to be in the plan?
The state of Virginia.
Okay, and so the state of Virginia has a set rule of what has to be in it.
Correct.
So we could technically go through.
It's not specific like that though. It's more general. You need a chapter on housing. You need a chapter on, it doesn't tell you exactly what has to be in all of, you see what I'm saying? You
So
need
it
a
sounds
chapter
like
on
a guide.
demographic.
It sounds like a guide. It
Right.
doesn't sound like a standard.
Right.
Well, a guide gives you left and left and right, and or wide and depth and breadth. So I think you do have some wisdom where you don't have to get a marketing firm or a firm that does this and have that $175,000, that $300,000 bill, which conveniently eats up the budget that we have.
Well, a lot of times these are done in conjunction with grant money. So a lot of times this is not funded 100% by the town budget. So this is something we should be pursuing though and looking for now is if we can get help with this, we should be looking out for opportunities to get help with it. Like the grant for the housing chapter was $20,000, $10,000, which is half the price of what other housing chapters have cost other people. I went into some research on that too. So $10,000 is a good price for one chapter, and that And that was all 100% funded by
Like,
the VH, yeah, Virginia Housing Authority,
What does Virginia, how often does it need to be updated by regulation?
5 years.
Every 5 years, so we're already delinquent.
No, we have approved an update, but we didn't actually update it. So we're not delinquent on anything, however, a good practice is that we should.
And I think what we're seeing is, as we do things, we find the statistics, number one, out of date. We find a lot of the land use out of date. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in preparing for the future. And basically, that's our job, to really plan for what should be 10 years from now. And that's a tough job. But according to what I understood, we are supposed to pave the way for that.
The planning commission.
Yeah, I would just caution that we not take on too much of the work of doing surveys. Doing surveys can be very time-consuming and arduous. And two of the people that did the work on the economic study are sitting right here next to each other. And it was a lot of work. I mean, it's following up and following up and following up and following up. So, I mean, in theory, it sounds like a good idea to try to take on some of this ourselves. In practice, I'm not quite sure how we can manage it.
That's a good point.
There were, the things that jump out at me is that we've had, I've only been in town 4 years, but I've been to 2 sessions. One was the tourism, where they brought in anyone who wanted to come, like people from all these groups to be a part of it. The town council was represented, churches, community groups, and what came out of there could almost be verbatim found in the comp plan that we have now. The same thing with the downtown Colonial Beach, when, you know, brainstorming session. What do people think the town needs? I don't think, I'm not saying there haven't been some changes because land use has changed, businesses that have come and gone, but a lot of that core piece from the survey is still applicable. We've never accomplished it.
Yes,
There
I
still
agree
comes
with
to
that.
have to the same, the bicycle path.
Well, and that's why we started the CIP, or really initiated that it happened. Because prior to 2015, Planning Commission had nothing to do with that CIP, and we pushed for that.
Yeah, yeah. The CIP is the connecting piece between a comprehensive plan and actually implementing it.
Right.
Getting it into the budget.
Now, most of the items that are on the CIP right now are from the comp plan. And there's still others, I agree, Dan, that need to be addressed, but we couldn't put it into everything. But you're right, there's things in our comp plan that we haven't done action-wise.
Well, maybe the first thing is to look into updating just chapter 1 and maybe getting price for just updating the statistics, which seems to be the one thing that we keep stumbling over are these updated statistics. So instead of, I mean, I still think we need to consider the cost of what it's going to be to update the entire plan in the next so many years and understand that and look for opportunities to pay for that. However, you know, the more immediate thing would be focusing on chapter 1.
I agree, chapter 1 would be absolutely necessary.
Perhaps if you could consider doing it in phases, it would make
Yeah,
the project more appealing to the
That's
folks
true.
that have to fund it.
right. Yeah.
Who does seek grants for the town?
I guess it depends on the purpose of the grant, would be my guess. For instance, if it was a public works grant, I suspect the public works would be involved in it. If it's something that has to do with improving our shoreline, I guess planning.
Well, I mean, it really, yeah, it just kind of depends, you know. I was actually seeking out grants for stormwater management plan. I was actually seeking out a grant to update the common plan for transportation chapter. I was partnering with VDOT. then there's other stuff, like you said, like Public Works will, you know, you got the grant, you know, improve infrastructure and that kind of thing, so, it just kind of really depends. Sometimes we even seek Northern Net Plan District Commission's, help on that as well. They actually applied for the EU development block grant, and that's how we ended up getting that.
Okay.
Yeah, they apply, they've also done housing grants for us, and I know they're a good resource, but the planning director is really, he researches and tries to find grants related to a lot of what we do.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate your even talking about it.
Yeah. Okay, next up is, I wanna follow up on some of these goals. I know Mr. Busick is not here, so I'm going to speak for him. He did email me back and said that he had contacted, the high school civics teacher, Mr. Klaver, but had not received a response, at all. We had originally thought that this is for reaching out to our high school to talk a little bit about what the planning commission is and how it interacts, with the town government. And so since Mr. Busick, will not be on the commission any longer, maybe somebody else would like to, yeah? Thank you, Glenn, I appreciate it. So that line item will go transfer over to Glenn. Also, we already got capital improvement plan. Mr. Robertson, Dan is, working on a flow chart.
No, Robertson
No,
is Quinn.
Robertson is Quinn,
Yeah.
Dan Costler, and Quinn Robertson.
Nothing wrong with that. It's on the mayor's desk. I think we're all aware that the mayor's doing double duty right now.
Right.
As well as we have some vacancies that will affect that same org chart. So,
Right.
from my position, it's ready to be signed off on, or until I get further guidance.
Okay,
So we're in a good position with that, so as soon as we have some movement.
I mainly just don't wanna forget about it
No,
and let
yes.
it go into the abyss of things that,
Understood, and it's one of those.
That sounds great because it's been on there for 2 years.
yeah, and on our goals, it's been on our goals. We're gonna try to stay ahead of it. Okay, Dan, Mr. Costler is working with, Mr. Rogers on the assets, capital assets.
I haven't worked directly with him yet, but
Okay.
he helped me get the list from, Brendan.
Okay,
And, what I've done is I put together the rolling stock so far, because that's sort of my comfort zone. Buildings, as far as that goes, it's gonna be a totally different animal. And I probably use too much rolling stock, because I supposed to use police cars. No.
that's not a capital asset.
So I could actually take those out.
Yeah.
But it's just a sample
Okay,
of what I've done so far. So a lot of those will be taken out, a lot of them are police cruiser and police utility. And I went ahead and put year purchase on there just so give a 5-year plan, 5-year replacement plan. So if something's in poor condition, you know, it's off the books.
so do you need to meet with Rob Murphy?
Probably
Uh,
eventually, I would
I
say.
think that Rob Murphy is going to have, what I'm doing is enlarging the, inventory report because it's so small.
Uh-huh,
I had to use a
magnifying.
glass to read it. And so what I'm doing is, Kelly is working with me to expand it so it's readable and everybody will have a copy. And then that'll go with this, so that when we do our CIP, the inventory will go with it.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times vehicles are not a capital asset because they're not worth enough. So, but mostly machinery and equipment,
That's on there.
yeah,
too.
I thought that, so, it looks good, but.
That's great.
So just work together so we don't have an overlapping document. I want 2 different documents with partial information on it. I want one complete document that's in the, a constructed part of the capital.
Excuse me, what dollar value are we using for a capital asset?
I didn't have any dollar, well, I have it at home, but I had, that's the actual book value and everything.
$50,000 or more.
50,000 or more, and what about the useful life? Is there a predetermined useful life, or does it vary on the asset?
it varies on the
Right, very on
asset.
the asset, because building of course would be a lot longer than.
Yeah.
Vehicles.
Straight line depreciation,
I'm sorry,
straight line depreciation on the capital assets.
again, I didn't really look at the numbers, I was putting together this form as far as.
And that may be something to get with Mr. Rogers about
Right.
and see how they do it in the Treasury Department. There is a chapter, I know neither one of you have yet to attend the planning commission, training. And there is a chapter very specifically on capital assets in that documentation. And so, Susan Maureen, do you have a copy of it, or I can give him my copy? And that way it clarifies exactly your questions of where's the bottom line number and how does that come?
Is there an accountant work for the town yet?
And there's Mr. Gibbs, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, Phil Rogers would be the one who's filling in, he's a CPA, so he should be up to
Okay.
snuff on this stuff.
Okay. Does that cover that?
Yes.
Any other questions? I want to thank Mr. Robertson for taking the BPA course, and we'll look forward to you having that knowledge soon as that finishes up. Also, Mr. Nelson and Ms. Colson are compiling the contact information. Is that right? Getting a contact us?
So, actually, Maureen and I have started working on it, but it occurred to me that maybe it should have been changed.
It says Ms. Tolson in our minutes from last month.
Oh, you gave me work that I didn't have to do.
No, we like it.
Happy to take that off your.
Okay,
Well,
we can transfer it.
it's funny, because as I'm meeting with Maureen earlier, I'm like, what? Explain what? Anyway, Maureen, that will be one less thing on there.
I will gladly give it to her.
But we have, Maureen and I did meet, and we have put together a list of all the organizations that we're trying to get contact information for. And I don't know if you started, but I've started. Yeah.
I'll hand it over. I have no problem handing it on.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'm glad I could clarify.
How did that happen? You and I both thought it was
I don't know
you.
why.
Yes.
I digress just a minute. I mean, I want to say that I think staff pulls off an amazing amount of work in this town. I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, this is a staff responsibility, but, there are only so many hours in a day. But I was curious to know if anyone is monitoring any of you monitor those Virginia lists of Virginia grants that are available to towns and communities?
I haven't looked at that in a little while. I want to say probably since maybe August.
Well, I wondered because we're getting several. I monitor a lot of different things, but there's some that are very specific for the state of Virginia that all to communities. The problem is that what I have found is if I either have to go to the department itself and look for the posting, or there are services available that are shooting me the list, but because we're not a member, I can't access the detailed information.
Actually, Maureen had a meeting with the mayor and I and Ms. Chiarello, and she asked us to register the town for the Virginia Grant Association, and we are in the process of.
Are doing that?
Yes,
Okay, because I get those all the time, but you can only go so far and you can't.
and actually it was Maureen who initiated that.
Okay. Because I have volunteered to monitor those, but then we need a process for where they go for when we identify them. And obviously, we're losing your expertise for a while and whoever should. But I have volunteered to take that on because I know there's only so much time in the day to do it.
Well, this week alone, some of the grants that are available are open to the town as well as an organization such as ACB. And we can't apply for them because we're not members. So we would appreciate membership.
Can I ask a process question on that while
Yes.
we're talking about grants? Do we have a relationship, does the town have a relationship with anyone now whose responsibility would be perhaps to seek out grants that the town would be susceptible to receiving for a modest finder's fee? I don't even know if that's legal, but it sounds like it could be. So I guess the question is, do we have any contractual relationship with anyone who would assist us in seeking out and getting those grants?
Not at this,
Well, so basically, again, that would go back to, like, for example, as far as like a private organization, we did seek out Aaron Studios help originally for the community development block grant, and we tried for it twice, and then after we couldn't get it the first time, we reached out to another commission. So I would assume if you're looking for anybody that's successful and that kind of thing, I would say Northern Academy.
I guess what I'm really asking is, do we have anybody currently who is actively seeking potential grants for the town, in which if we secure those grants, they are provided some type of a finder's fee on the
No.
part of the town?
we do not.
Basically, that's an ethical no-no.
Well, leave it to me to find the other one.
Well, I do think though that, you know, there are volunteers and several volunteers in town that have a lot of experience with grant writing, that have offered their services in the past to assist in these things, and that the only service that has been necessarily maybe had some sort of compensation would be the Northern Neck Planning District, after this maybe we're members sort of that association, and that's what they do. And they do living shoreline grants. So if we're looking for a living shoreline grant to complete a capital improvement, they do it.
I think there's a lot of confusion about what Northern Neck does, and I spent some time looking into that. People misinterpret who they are and what they do and why they get compensated. And they deserve, in my opinion, they deserve to be compensated. And they're being compensated because they can serve as an administrator for the grant. They're continuing to do work, to coordinate, make sure that we stay on task. It's not that they just get a cut of the grant. You have to earn that money. And so I'd be happy to share that information with you, but I know people have been upset with them and sometimes the way they do things, but I think they have done a great job for this town.
Number one, they've been successful. So, in obtaining the grant.
And I have gone down and met with them on several occasions for downtown Colonial.
All right, I want to move forward with our agenda. The last thing on the update for the goals was the brochure on how to start a business in Colonial Beach.
Yes, it's coming along. I am working on it, actively pulling information from hither and yon, and I would say I'm about on a third done. It's coming along. Okay. It's going to be, it's going to be about 20 pages long, just as an aside.
So much for being a bifold brochure.
Yeah, I'm not, I haven't gotten to the stage of trying to format it. I'm very far from that, but hopefully I'll figure out some way of formatting it so it's a handy document to use.
Okay.
I just want to insert here that I keep in contact with Lisa Hall, who was at Northern Neck, and they had a workshop this past month on developing the business brochure. And you might want to call her and check out what they did at that. It was on the 18th of October, and it was how to write a business brochure for new businesses.
Are you talking about how to write a business plan?
No, how to write something to tell new businesses how to do it in town. I'll send you the copy of the email I got.
Oh. That's all I had for following up on that. Anything from anybody else? And I'll move forward to our presentation by Ms. Karen Sullivan on proposal of a dog park in Colonial Beach.
Thank you. Thank you. Can someone dim the lights?
You need a chair?
I think they'll-
My name is Karen Sullivan, and I live at 2010 Beach Avenue, and I am here today representing Colonial Beach River Dogs. We are an LLC that is a nonprofit community organization. We're currently operating without a 501c3 due to the low income that we get on an annual basis, but donations to the organizations are still deductible under IRS law because our total income is so low. Our basic goal is making Colonial Beach more dog friendly and dog safe. And we have a series of projects that we work on. Our first project and a number one priority for us was installation of pet waste stations in high traffic areas in town, and we have to date installed 10. These have all been sponsored by individuals and through a little bit of fundraising that we do as an organization. We also have an educational outreach program. The main project that we're doing right now is a dog bite prevention program, and we're working with the school system, and we're presenting that to the first graders right now once a year. We are working towards the possibility of getting a rabies clinic in town. It wouldn't be too difficult to just do a rabies clinic, but we'd like to coordinate it with the county so that people could get their rabies shots for their dogs and their county dog license at the same time. It's our understanding that there's a large number of people in town that don't realize they have to have a Westmoreland County dog license, and so there are a lot of illegal dogs in town, and we'd like to see that change. We are also interested in changes in regulations regarding dogs on the beach and the boardwalk. I've talked with Mayor Blunt a couple of times about this. Right now, dogs are allowed on the public beaches and on the boardwalks in the wintertime, basically, starting October 1st and ending March, 30 days of September, 31st. We would like to see that changed as it is in a lot of other beach towns, particularly beach towns on the ocean in North and South Carolina, where dogs are allowed on the beach during certain hours. They're not allowed on high traffic hours when the beaches are packed, but for example, before 9 in the morning or after 6 in the evening, or even at a beach like Colonial Beach, it could be all day except on the weekends when our beaches are really packed. And our justification for this is that people are taking their dogs on the beach, and the Chief Plott, Danny, has told me several times that they just do not have the manpower to enforce these regulations. When they see somebody, they try to gently tell them that it's illegal. But I think a compromise would be let's have some regulations where we make this a much more dog-friendly place for people that live here and for people that visit here. And the priority that I'm going to talk to you tonight is about a dog park. And this is actually an addition to the original ideas that we had because of the input from the community, including members of town council and lots of people that live here in the community. So the benefits of a dog park, number one, it is a proposal that's been driven by local citizens and the mayor. It has added value to Colonial Beach and proves our standing as a dog-friendly and a dog-safe town. It provides a public gathering place for dog owners and for training and canine good citizenship evaluation. It provides a public place for off-leash play, socialization, and additional training. With adequate physical and mental exercises, a lot of the problem dog behaviors that my clients and my friends and neighbors see in their dogs decrease. A dog park can result in healthier pets and people, improving the quality of life in Colonial Beach. And I'd just like for you to keep these benefits in mind as I talk about a plan for a future dog park here. The top requirements for a dog park. Number one is we have to pick the right spot. And the guidelines in a lot of the literature say we want to pick a spot that's already frequented by dog owners. If possible, if there are some natural boundaries so we don't have to put up excessive fencing. There should be adequate access by vehicles and adequate parking. And we should avoid residential only areas. In other words, we don't want to put a dog park in an area where there's nothing but homes there that expect a quiet spot. We want to put it in an area where there's already a lot of public activity going on so that it's not encroaching on a new encroachment on a neighborhood. The infrastructure for the enclosed area, 4-foot fencing is adequate, and I see this in a lot of dog parks, but 5 to 6 foot is actually recommended in the literature. There should be 2 sections. These can be divided for either large dogs or small dogs, or they can be divided as recovery areas in case of high seasonal use. For example, if you've been to the dog park in Fredericksburg, they have 2 sections, and only 1 section is open at a time so that the grass can recover in the other section because they have high seasonal use. There should be benches for people, there should be obstacles for dogs, there should be pet waste stations and trash cans. There should be gating that is a controlled entrance and exit space, and we call this a vestibule. And you use that area for leashing and unleashing your dog as you come in and go out. There's a phenomenon called leash aggression that a lot of dogs will exhibit, and they don't exhibit it if they are free to run around and move in the direction that they want to go. So in most dog parks, there are rules that say your dog comes into the vestibule on leash, you unleash the dog and then open the gate and go into the park with your dog off leash. There should be trees or pavilions, some sort of shade, particularly in this part of Virginia in the summertime. It gets extremely hot, and to have a dog park totally out in the open is not appropriate. There should be a source of water. The ability to put in a water tap, just a pipe usually coming out of the ground with the handle, the old-fashioned handle that turns it on and off is what I see in most dog parks. And there should be a large metal bowl that can be attached and emptied so that you don't have water sitting there as a mosquito trap. So that if you're the last one to leave the dog park, one of the things that you would be asked to do would be to dump the water and leave the bowl for the next person to fill up with fresh water. And there should be good signage, rules and regulations clearly displayed at the entrance to the dog park. Some of the rules and regulations that I personally, as a professional dog trainer and animal behaviorist, think that we should consider, and I see this in a lot of other areas, is that our dog park should be for the use of Colonial Beach residents and their dogs. Part-time residents, full-time residents are welcome, but it should not be a destination for people that have a dog and live in another area to be coming here and taking their dog. Owners are legally responsible for their dogs and any injuries caused by or to them. Dogs must be properly licensed, inoculated, and healthy. Dogs must wear a collar with their rabies, dog license, and ID tags on them. Owners must clean up after their dogs. Any dog showing aggressive behavior towards people or other animals should be removed from the park immediately. And in this case, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If a dog becomes aggressive because another dog got in their face, the appropriate thing to do is to have both dogs leave the park. Animals that have exhibited a history of aggressive behavior should not be permitted to return to the park. Puppies using a park should be at least 4 months old and have all of their shots. So puppies don't get their rabies shots until they're 4 months old. They're also highly susceptible to diseases that other dogs might have. especially when dogs defecate and urinate, some of the diseases can be transferred to puppies, even though people have picked up the feces after they defecate. Owners must stay with and watch their dogs at all times. Children under the age of 16 should only come into the park with a parent or an adult guardian that can supervise them. Dogs that are in heat, that are reproductively active, should not be allowed in the park. People shouldn't be bringing in food, beverages, glass, sharp objects, or weapons, nor should you be bringing in dog treats that could cause resource guarding between the dogs. So when you come into the dog park, we would ask you that you leave your treats outside unless it's a specific training session that you're attending that requires treats. Owners can unleash their dog when they come into the park, but they should keep that leash with them. And the dogs must be leashed before leaving the park. And violators would be subject to removal from the park and suspension of park privileges. So the recommended sites that I make are Robin Grove or the community center. Robin Grove has already been considered a park by many in the town. It's kind of the default dog park. A lot of people actually think it is a dog park. It's been requested by locals that we put up some fencing there for an off-leash park. This space is good because the neighboring property is already active. There's a marina on one side, the town water station is on the other side. There are basically two homes across the street, but it's not surrounded by residential property. There's good infrastructure in place, including a natural boundary of water and fencing. There's already a parking area there. There's already paths there. There's plenty of shade. There's a pavilion. There's trash receptacles. And my understanding is that there's a water line that we could tap into, but I don't have documentation on that. It's just what I've been told. There is a high probability of donor support from property owners in town on the point. I won't say most, but a lot of our high-end donors that donate to these kinds of projects do live on the point and have dogs on the point. So I think we would be more likely to raise money for funding this in Robin Grove area or somewhere on the point. And the main issue and the reason that I have been dragging my feet with presenting a proposal to town council is that we have to have shoreline restoration done there. That may require that after we get the dog park established, we have to go back in and renovate it or change it or take down fencing and put fencing back up. So I don't know who knows how long before we can get that funding. I know it's a priority, but it's still at least a year or so probably down the road. So I would recommend that any fencing we put up to do it towards the street and offset towards the marina, so there would still be good access for construction to go in there and do the shoreline restoration. And I'm assuming that everybody knows, but these days shoreline restoration is not putting up a hard structure. It's gradually sloping down, using grasses and things to stabilize the shoreline. It would not be recommended that we put up a hard structure or a seawall or anything there. So that could, down the road, provide access for dogs to swim from that point near the dog park. The other site that I have recommended is the community center. There is a space, if you're facing the community, if you're standing on Marshall facing the community center on the right, there's a grove of trees there. It's kind of behind the parking lot to the right. So between the backyard, if you would call it that, and the side street and behind the parking, there's a space there that I think could be fenced and very easily and quickly become a dog park for off-leash. Now the town has recommended, here's the Robin Grove site. It's very difficult to see this, but as you can see, there's a couple of houses across the street, 802 and 810 is how they're labeled there, but they're the only residential properties immediately adjacent to this property. So the alternative sites that the town staff have proposed are Dwight Avenue and Euclid Avenue. Euclid is a right-of-way, It's possibly a future through street, and it's currently used as a golf cart and bike path. Dwight is kind of the dead-end, uncleared, possibly future right-of-way. If Dwight was to continue through 12th Street and into what have been in the past considered 13th and 14th Street, which nobody lives on because streets haven't been put in, and into Riverview Meadows. Both of these are in residential areas, and both would require additional funding for parking, for shade, and the town has actually recommended, the town staff have recommended this as more than a dog park, as a green space or open area or other facilities be there. And quite honestly, that's not within the scope of what our organization is trying to do. We would like to establish a dog park in a place that is already considered a park. The other problem there is that there aren't any existing boundaries, natural or man-made, so it would require, I think, more fencing than the other two sites would. Dwight Avenue, there's a pink outline on this picture between the numbers 203 and 155, and it's where Dwight Avenue goes through from 4th Street to 6th Street, I believe. And this is one of the sites that they proposed, but it is an active right-of-way and golf and bicycle path. I'm sorry, I just said that totally wrong. Dwight Avenue is at the end of 12th Street. So that's 12th Street that you see running from the left to the right across the diagonal. And there's this small area that goes through where all those lots above the numbered lots were proposed future lots for 13th, 14th Street. And then Euclid Avenue is the larger space that runs between 7th and 9th Street. But again, this is an active golf cart and bicycle path. Another alternative site would be Eleanor Park if we were to get the Virginia Outdoors Foundation grant and if the town was to agree to accept that grant. It's also currently used by many dog owners. It has adequate shade. It's near the river for possible future access. Right now, that's boulders there, so you can't actually get down to the river without risking life and limb. There is adequate potential parking there, and it is a residential area, but the advantage to this is along a main road and river with Irving Avenue being there, so it's not quite, the residents there don't quite expect the quietness that the residents in Classic Shore do. And I think the computer just froze. We do not want an update. Apologies. Okay, description of the enclosure. What I would recommend is a 100 by 100 foot fenced area that is 5 foot high chain link fence, and this would be divided into two sections. Running along the front side of that would be a 10 by 20 vestibule. This would actually be within the 100 by 100 foot area with 3 gates. One gate would be the exit from the park, and then there would be a separate gate into each section. I'd also recommend 2 emergency only back gates or side gates, 1 in each section. The rules and regulations signage on the entrance and the entrance exit gate, which I went over my recommended rules. 3 petway stations, one inside each section and then one outside of the park as you're approaching the park. And then 2 benches, one in each section, using the existing pavilion and trash cans in one of the sections, and installing a water tap with a cement base to prevent it from becoming a mud hole and metal bowl. And these are all the amenities that I have seen in other dog parks, actually all over the East Coast. So how are we going to fund this and how are we going to maintain it? There are various different ideas. We would propose a community capital fund drive led by River Dogs, where we would raise the initial money. We would go, we have an annual River Dogs membership fee for which we could allot a portion of that to the maintenance. There are also grants. There are 4 grants that are available pretty much on an annual basis. One of them is Nutro, that's a dog food company. Theirs is called Roam to Roam. The Doris Day Animal Foundation has a grant that we can apply for. There's a Pet Safe for your park grant and a Beneful Dream Park grant. And this is just the grants that come around year after year. There are also other grants available that will come out one year or another. So at this time, I'd like to take any questions or any comments that you have for the record.
Before we get into questions and comments, I do want to ask if you will send us a copy of the presentation so that we can make it accessible to the public through a link on Facebook maybe, and also on the town website. Is that possible, Kelly? Would you be able to do that? And then we can link to it.
I should be able to, yeah.
Put it on the town website somewhere under.
I'll put it in a format that doesn't take up as much space as the full PowerPoint, but you'll still be able to flip through it.
Sure, yeah, PDF or something like that. I appreciate it. Okay. Any questions now? Yeah.
You've got the recommended rules, the regulations to use the park. Who's the enforcer of this? Just
Peer pressure.
okay. So we're not creating any additional work for.
No, I don't think the town of Colonial Beach can afford a dog warden or anything right now. So it's basically, at most of these parks, it's peer pressure. And a lot of places that have these parks also have a Parks and Recreation department, and so there would be somebody maybe that would ride by if they on a regular basis. I don't know if that's something that our town staff would want to take on, but for the most part, it's peer pressure.
And is there any liability to the town at all?
The research that I've done says that there is no liability to the town, but that doesn't prevent somebody from suing the town. So we have that in the rules and regulations, and if we were to go with a member model, where people would have to fill out a form and sign a release before they had access to the park, that's a little bit more expensive and a little bit more time consuming because you have to have some sort of a lock on the gate where only members have the access code. But if you did that, then you could better formalize your release of liability to the town.
Who would be responsible for that? Is that something?
That would be something that River Dogs would undertake as the membership organization as part of their role.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't read this thing until just right before I came, so. I also wondered, because of Robin Road issues, initially you're recommending the dog park would be just in like an upper quadrant of that park. So the rest of the park is still available to others who don't have dogs that want to have access or use it for picnics or whatever.
Yeah, 100 by 100 space, if running behind the parking area, would take up about half, kind of the left half of the park.
And there wouldn't be any access at that time to the water for the animals.
No, that's not safe now, and right now there's nothing there that tells you it's not safe. But if you are standing on the edge of that right now, there's a good possibility that you'll fall in the creek.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's definitely not.
The term river dogs. Just saying. Is this open for discussion?
Yeah.
Right now. Number one, I'm a great proponent of the whole park. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it's obvious if you put time and thought, you have experience with it. What I would offer to you is that the location along the golf cart path, because it is a golf cart path, is probably ideal. There's additional green area and spaces that if it were to expand, it's vacant. There's minimal disruption to the neighborhood because, again, it has a lot of real estate around it that is not being occupied. And also that's where your population density is. Quite frankly, there's just more people in that geographic region of Colonial Beach, year-round. Have you given those types of dynamics any thought?
Yes, sir, I have, and from talking with the people that are pushing for the dog park, I don't think it would be used by most of those people, and they are the ones that I would be reaching out to get funding from. And the fact that it is, I don't know what the legal ramifications are, if it is a right-of-way and if it is set for future development, that it's not already a park, so it would require additional changes by the town council and the powers that be to get rid of that right-of-way and let it be used as a park. And again, that huge area is kind of beyond our scope, and it doesn't meet the other qualifications that are recommendations for a dog park.
Yes, but at the same time, we're talking about doing altercations around growth. So I don't know if one negates the other, but we're willing to do alterations on one end, but not the other. And the other aspect that I'd like to bring to the Planning Commission's attention is that there's a disparity in parks when we think of geography. If most of our population density is around the numbered streets, I can think of 3 parks on the point off the top of my head, and possibly 4 depending on what occurs with Illinois. So now I have a population density on the numbered streets with far few outlets, and I'm proposing creating another dog park where there's so many parks.
And I'm not proposing doing a new park, I'm proposing doing an enclosed area in an existing park. The other side of that point is, forgive me, I lost my train of thought. The staff recommended this area, and they brought up those points, and one of the points was, give me a second, it'll come to me.
Sure, I understand. And again, I think it's a fantastic idea.
I know what it was. It was in the staff report on this, that the residents in Classic Shores, basically 4th Street through 12th Street, have indicated that they would prefer more open green space type parks than they would basketball courts or volleyball courts or tennis courts, and that is absolutely not what I'm hearing from my neighbors, because that's where I live, is in Classic Shores. And so I think if we were going to develop a park on that end of town, something with more active recreational activities such as basketball courts, tennis courts, that sort of thing would be more appropriate than putting the dog park there.
I just want to point out that that wasn't actually people that said that, that was just the comprehensive plan that said that statement that you were talking about, the basketball courts and everything. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
But to close my statement, I would love to see some concrete numbers. I'm curious to just out of curiosity what those numbers look like, the upkeep, the yearly maintenance, just kind of ballpark figures.
Yeah, the initial cost is, depending on how big we do the enclosures and how many changes we have to make to the space, is going to probably be somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. The maintenance and upkeep is going to be having someone responsible who, we do this as a volunteer-driven organization now, for making sure that the pet waste containers are filled and that those trash cans are emptied. Cutting any grass or trimming around any grass that needs to be done, filling any holes, and a lot of this is done in most parts by the users. So As far as an annual maintenance, I'd have to do a little bit more research to, to give you that, but the initial cost is gonna be somewhere between 10 and 20,000.
Okay, thank you. That helps kind of frame and put the picture up. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a really good idea. I think it's needed. There's a lot of dogs in front of the beach, and they all have somewhere to go play. First question, would it be set hours? Any idea on set hours?
Most of the public dog parks do have set hours, and they're basically related to daylight.
Okay, dusk and dawn. And just a heads up, probably, you have a rules and regulations sign, probably a number for the sheriff's department more than the Colonial Beach. Police, they seem to handle animal situations, and there will be conflict because it's a dog park, and I've seen situations where dogs attack, and the next thing you know, the owners are attacking more than the dogs are, so, but yeah, probably some kind of police phone number up there.
Yeah, the number that goes to the Westmoreland Animal Shelter automatically defaults to dispatch if there's nobody there to answer it. They have 3 officers designated to deal with dog situations. Of course, they often refer calls back to the Colonial Beach Police if they are unable to respond for any reason. And the conflicts between the owners is going to be a local police issue, not a dog animal control issue.
I think most of the time we can resolve that part, but, just in case.
Yeah.
There should be a number somewhere. Most of the
Absolutely.
Thank you. Maria?
In your estimated cost of 10 to 20,000, what is included in that?
That's the fencing, the signage, the pet waste stations, putting a water pipe in with the cement base.
Because the thing that I don't like about the proposal along the bike path is people don't like to use that because they feel it's not a safe, secure area to walk. I live in that area, so that's the feedback that I get from neighbors. The other part is there's no lights on the bike path at dusk, and so I think it's to move. I'm not saying that I don't like the idea of a park there, because I do, and I think kids desperately need a place to play basketball, because they play out in White Avenue with their own basketball courts, because there's no place for them. And I think that's a location that makes sense for that, but it's going to require lights, it's going to require, like you said, I don't know if there's water already, I assume, for those in that area, but I would think the cost there with the Dwight Avenue or especially the bike or the golf cart area is going to require a lot more money than 10 to 20,000.
Or was dusk to dawn?
Sorry, you said that.
Yes, it is dusk to dawn, but in the other 2 areas, the approach is lighted, whereas it's not lighted in Euclid.
I don't know. Thank you. Right. I have a couple questions. I see the dog park and the development of the bike path as 2 separate issues, in my opinion. We have been talking about the bike path. It is a comprehensive plan. Neighborhood, I live on 4th Street, and I have a dog. So if my dog is not well behaved, I probably would not go to the dog park with her. But I support the dog park. I think it's a great idea. For some reasons, I see the end of Dwight, a little bit better. Also, I understand why that was proposed. Both sections, I understand why they were selected by ComStat. The idea of doing it for $10,000 to $20,000 that is community funded, where you're not requesting a lot of funds, you're really just requesting permission from the town, seems to me like the only 2 places that I identify as reasonable places for that to happen are the community center of Robin Grove, and then the possibility of Eleanor, depending on the direction that is taken with the GOF grant. So So I understand their point to say there, and that if we were going to develop a bike path, which I absolutely think needs to be done, with active park amenities in it, that's going to cost obviously significantly more and delay the project. So the question is, how fast do we want to do this? Is this a long-term idea where in 5 years or 3 years, we've got the funding and we implement this and it's over there? Or is this something that could happen this winter and by spring be open?
Our goal would be to do the fundraising so that we could get it in place by next season. That may be a little bit optimistic, but certainly within a year, so by next fall.
Okay. I think that, that's one point to make to the public. I think that it really differentiates the two sites, or the two, especially the point versus the classic shores, idea.
And that's not to say if the bike path was developed into a park that we might not want to put something over there too. But to get something done quickly, I think putting it in an existing space, that's sure. And I know the community center property is leased to the Colonial Beach Foundation, and they would have to, weigh in on whether or not they would like to have a fenced-in area for off-leash dogs there. But that leaves us with, for immediate action, basically with the permission of the foundation, the community center, or Robin Grove.
Yeah.
Can we clarify what the process is in order for your organization to go forth with seeking funding?
Yeah, I would need a resolution from the town and permission from the town council in order to apply for grant money, because the property belongs to the town.
Yeah, you would need an agreement there to make sure to be able to get grants. And do you know when any of those grants become available, or when the timing of those grants?
The 4 major ones have I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I have to check that.
But you can get back to us on that to make sure we don't miss a deadline on that. That may be vital.
I mean, if I get a thumbs up from the planning commission, then I would put together a list of actual grants, work with grant people that search for grant funding. I have my daughter does that, and also I have a couple of friends in town that do that and have access to grant databases. And so we would then do an active search for everything that was coming due that we could get proposals in within the next 6 months, and give that to you. I guess I'm just looking for a nod of the head to go forward, because it's a lot of time and effort in doing this. And if we don't feel like there's a path forward, there are other things we could be working on.
Sure. I have one more question before. I understand the point about picking an active place to put this because there is noise associated with it, and I see the asset of any of the 3 places on the point because there's already activity there. And the bike path also is a lot of activity. So I don't see that as necessarily a negative to the bike path, because I do think that is an active place where noise happens and it's quite busy actually, especially because of all car motors. And so in that aspect, I can see it's also surrounded by woods right now and not to be developed for quite some time, I can imagine, considering we're not focusing on it and there's no sewer and water infrastructure on some of those streets. So, it's sort of, while it's in a residential, surrounded by residences, it's also not yet. And if this is a short-term, quick solution, where we're putting in, and not to say that $10,000 or $20,000 is not a significant amount of money, because it is from community contribution. But if it could also be moved and placed to a new location if things were to change or evolve or develop, then I could see possibilities, even at Robin Grove, where you would possibly move it.
I would caution that once we have a dog park established on the point, to move it somewhere else might not be accepted by the residents, and I would say it would probably also be just as cheap to build a second one as it would to move one.
Sure, okay, well, that's the point to me. And how do you feel about, from your experience as a dog trainer, having a dog park that is so close to things like bicycles and golf carts passing by and things like that. I would say both Eleanor and the bike path have a significant amount of traffic in which dogs are maybe, you know,
Yeah,
barked at.
and to be quite honest, dogs that are reactive to bicycles and cars, their owners generally don't take them places, because it's a pain to deal with them, and it's embarrassing if, you know, when my dog goes off in a bicycle. In fact, I'm training a service dog puppy right now by riding my bicycle indoors, and she's learning to stay away from the pedals. But no, I mean,
So that's not as much of a concern.
it's not as much of a concern. It would depend on how close and how active, how close to the road the actual fenced area is, and how active that road is. And I don't know if you're familiar with Duck Green Park, but they have set their dog park way off from their parking lot. You have to walk down a path to get there. In Fredericksburg, the dog park is bordered by the canal walk and also by other recreational areas like a fishing pond and that sort of thing, and there aren't roads that go right next to it. I can't say that I've seen a dog park where it's next to a highly active area, but then again, you know, the golf cart path is never gonna be a thoroughfare where you've got cars going by really fast.
Yeah, I've been sitting here sort of thinking about Robin Grove, and I guess I feel a little bit of concern about the idea of putting something there, even in the interim, even in the spot that you're talking about, with the prospect that at some point, I'm guessing heavy machinery and stuff like that is going to come into that space and do what it needs to be done to grade it down. And it just seems like maybe for Robin Grove, we should be, at least for that space, we should be trying to understand what the path forward is for that before we make it into a dog park. It just doesn't seem like the right order of things.
And that's been why I've kind of been dragging my feet. I don't know what the plan exactly. I do have some experience. I have a degree in marine science and coastal zone management, but I don't know exactly what that process would look like. A lot of shoreline restoration is done from the water side, so it may not be heavy equipment coming into the park, but there would certainly be some sort of traffic coming into the park.
I do have that concern, because I don't want to see your fence go, number one, but have we asked those residents that live right there their opinion?
I haven't personally.
I mean,
I will say that they are used to dogs going over there, and that several people have to already think there's a dog park even though it is not.
well, I agree with that because I live right down the block, but my concern is that I think out of courtesy, we should definitely check with those close residents, particularly those that are right facing Robin Park and on the side there. But, I mean, I'm just saying, I would love to see it there. I have a dog of my own, it's a block away, and I walk past it every day. But I see Eric's point, because I don't want you to have to destroy what you built if we have heavy machinery there on both sides. And seeing the height of that water line is going to be a big difference because of the height. I've seen them do the shoreline from the water along Colonial Beach Avenue there, Monroe Bay Avenue, but I haven't seen them do that height one yet. I would love the park there, because I'm not a dog owner, but I also think that Eric's point is well taken. And the other properties that are there, I mean, I don't know what the future land process is going to be, but I'm hoping it's going to be park over there because of the need for the residents that are there. And I don't know what to say. I would love to see it there, but I have that hesitation that Eric expressed.
Okay. I think for right now, I'm gonna propose that we table this and consider the presentation that was made today and have further discussion on it at next month's meeting, because I don't wanna be hasty and giving her a thumbs up to any one location before we have a chance to maybe talk to the public a little bit more, for your presentation to be publicly accessible to people so they can understand some of the points that you make here. Because I think a lot of people have a quick opinion about it without, the knowledge that you've given us today. So I would propose that we table this discussion, and then it also gives a chance for people to come to our next meeting and speak at public comment if they feel one way or the other, or they are a resident that lives next to one of these areas and are opposed to it. The city of Warrenton put in a dog park. It took them 8 years because of citizen complaints. They finally found a great solution, and they're very happy with their dog park, and everybody is super excited about it. But let's try to be more preemptive about that than getting it to town council and then people coming to public comment. So let's try to encourage people to come to public comment if they live near one of these areas and get their opinion out.
Is there, have there been any proposals on how to do this shoreline restoration?
Yes,
Could,
there is a
Can we
design as
see-
well.
yeah, could,
It's
available?
it's online with the CIP. It's part of the capital improvement plan.
It would actually be a really great place for a dog to have access to.
It would be, once that's finished, I think it'll be great.
so, I know, Peter's gone, I think, but, I mean, from that perspective, if the foundation.
Right.
As a new board member of the,
I have to recuse myself from the.
well, but you could make the presentation at the next board meeting of the foundation, so that there can be full information about what would be involved.
Is there any other discussion at this time? Is everybody in agreement to do this for next month? Excellent.
I'd just like to see this new, I think.
Yes, I agree. I don't want to hold it up.
Process.
Right.
We need to make a commitment, so if we're not,
Agreed.
then let's get on with it. It's not right.
No, I agree with that. And maybe by November, Karen, could you bring us some dates of when you possibly would have to make grant application? If we had some dates, that would help us too.
So do I understand the concept is got a nod to move forward, it's just a matter of a site that we discuss further?
Yes, that's
Yes.
exactly right.
Public opinion weighing in, especially on a site location. I've heard a lot of positivity from our community about this, personally. I think the biggest question is liability, is what that's the only negative that I've heard. And I think if we address that appropriately and we're reasonable in it, then I feel mostly positive response to this. So I would say, can we agree that we would like to move forward with the idea and it's just about a location at this point? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
It would be great if, Bill, if council could give us a nod about any public works that they would get grants for the shoreline. Is there any way we can investigate whether the Robin Grove shoreline design that has already been done by the survey, could we investigate when that possibly would take place? That would help us make a good decision.
I guess it's dependent on grant availability. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of driven by the availability of grants, either from named government entity. So, I mean, I'm certainly willing to explore that with the council and with Public Works, but I think it's grant dependent.
I think this particular project, the grant required that it be a priority, be prioritized by council to be sought after. As is with a lot of requests, if you guys make a resolution that you want to, that this is a priority to pursue this, then that really puts a lot more weight behind a grant application for getting funding.
And the head of public works would then react.
And
Also, are we waiting, we've got the plans, but why don't we have an estimate on what the cost is?
There is an estimate.
There is an estimate,
It's in the
yes.
CIP.
It was on
That
the,
is to be determined.
No, they think they have that now.
they have that now.
Mr. Dillon, is it also possible to get legal to go ahead and preemptively kind of look at what right looks like?
Kelly.
Let's say again,
Legal, have the attorney look at it and see, what surrounds this issue? That way it doesn't take another month, that she's already had a chance to look at, the liability aspect of it. We'll already have an answer from council, from the
Sure.
I'll reach out to some of the other towns that have dog parks and ask how they dealt with their liability, because almost every town in the state of Texas will.
Yeah.
Warsaw just opened theirs.
The more research we can do at our level here, then by the time we made a recommendation, it really comes with all that, that information. It can be really validated when it reaches people. So let's get answer as many of these questions as we can.
I got one quick question. Have you ever worked with the Northern Neck Soil and Water District? See if there's any money available through Chesapeake Bay Act?
not to my knowledge, Brendan.
I have Corey's reached out to them trying to get some grant money. I know I was actually working with them for a grant to grant basically to put the municipal parking lot and to make it green.
Permeable pavers.
Yeah,
On
permeable
the other
pavers
street.
and everything, but unfortunately, the grant opportunity wasn't worth how much money we would have to match it for.
Mhm.
So I did like a redesign, and I sent it back to Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District, and just do an infiltration trench to catch all the water that comes through there, but I actually cut it off. But yeah, we have reached out to them for getting some grants.
They might give somebody that can help.
With this.
Yeah.
I've also heard that NOAA has, possibility to have money for this as well. And again, the Northern Neck Planning District does join the grant. I know I've kept you guys here for quite some time today. Under other topics, the last thing that I wanted to do before we adjourn was that I wanted to throw an idea out. This will be my last year chairing the Planning Commission, as we have term limits, so I appreciate my time being chair. But I do want to propose a creative and unique idea. I think one of our frustrations has been that we're making recommendations to council and then we don't get enough attention for them or response. And so next month or so, we'll spearhead the idea of hosting an art show in the town meeting room here with the theme of what the playground in the Potomac would look like in the future. What the boardwalk would look like if the properties that we have proposed to sell that nobody will talk about, and why they won't talk about why they will sell them, I don't know. But to further the work that we've done here at the Planning Commission, to work with our local community, and to demonstrate that in a more visual way to our town council and to our citizens. And so I don't think this would cost any money necessarily, and I have already reached out to Carl Thor, but I don't want to go any further if we don't support it as a planning commission to, first. So it's just an idea to throw out there to give an opportunity for our local art community or people that are developers to work with a local artist to render what they view the playground of the Potomac, the Colonial Beach Boardwalk to look like.
I'd like the idea to be done, but I don't think the timing is right yet, because we're moving into the holidays, really. And we're not gonna get the permanent residents who are going to Florida right now, a lot of them. And, I think that we should wait until we can get a lot of the residents who own homes here at a time. Many don't come in the winter. So I would postpone that until early, 2018.
So spring.
Yeah, I just think we're biting off too much too fast.
Okay.
My concern is permanent residents who go to Florida.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, not all, not all.
Right.
I wish it was I.
How do I become one of those? Yeah, but I was concerned, did you mean people who own homes here but only come in the summer?
Yeah, a lot of people don't come during the winter months on the weekends. And I would like to make sure that we have enough publicity and enough foresight to have it so that we can get as many of our people as possible in this room.
I think part of the idea was that if it's sponsored with Artfield, that they already do their show in the June, July months, and that this would be an alternative during the winter for them to have an activity that really did focus on our permanent residents input, which are, here year round, and how they see it evolving. Because I think they're probably our loudest group as far as seeing development down there. And it's really just an idea getter,
I also think
take
that
it as far as you want. So the next step is to meet with Helen if this is something we want to pursue, but if we're not sure, we want to hold off on it, then I just don't want to go any further on the idea. It's just a concept right now, unless we're on board with doing it.
Well, personally, I think it's an interesting idea. I wonder if the guild has enough oomph to make it happen.
We would have to, I think, be very supportive of the owner.
Yeah.
And that would be part of our role in it, I think.
Would you open these up to students, to
Yeah.
anybody? To draw us, and the idea is
Yep.
to.
Anybody.
Give us a design, a drawing, and what does it look like?
I think I'm open to all kinds of media, sculpture, digital, photography, Photoshop, any kind of drawing. And specifically, though, I would like to reach out to the school through the CLC program. I do a session with that program already, and could have even second, third, and fourth graders draw their vision. A little bit of everything. It is, very community oriented, which is where I think of.
And it doesn't create any work for staff or anything.
Well, we would be sponsoring it as in, we would be helping to coordinate it and hang it, I think.
What did Carl say?
He's excited about it. He thinks that it was a good idea. But he wants to talk to Helen, and he thinks that they would be supportive of it if they've been approached already about maybe what Colonial Avenue would look like. So it sort of falls in line with something they're already thinking about.
what date are you proposing?
I don't have a date yet. I just want to know whether we think it's a good idea and I should continue, or if we think that any other thoughts on it before we move forward.
I think conceptually, people are interested in it. I would actually plan it more. You have companies right now that are currently looking at to market us, what a better way to market us. But I don't think you get that done in a month.
No, I agree, yeah.
I agree with Maureen that you can actually make this big enough where it could be an actual event, but it will take time.
I'd also like to add that with the zoning administrator leaving, I'll be doing 2 jobs, and regardless of who will be filling the vacancy at what point, I'm going to be really backlogged on work, so the free time that I have will be minimal at best. And so it would be something that I would like to see somebody, an additional person in my office prior to setting aside a time to be here, you know.
Yeah. I don't think I was thinking that this would happen by December. I think that I just was thinking I wanted to get an idea that this could move forward before, you know, I don't have a date and we don't have anything scheduled. I just didn't want to, without the commission being involved, pursue any more information with anybody without you guys being aware.
You know, in general, I love the idea of having the residents of the thing be engaged in the future. I think that's just,
The concept is great.
it's a spectacular idea.
Okay, so maybe I will speak to Helen then, and at least,
I think we need to have an understanding how the process is going to work.
okay,
How it would. and
Yeah,
then-
or is there a process?
Is there-
right, sure. What
I
the
think we're ahead.
announcement would look like, and yeah, I think you guys are ahead of me too. I just wanna know if you think it's a good idea or not. If you think it's a good idea, then I'll get more information.
Are you
and then
thinking
come up
before
with-
Christmas?
I'd like to have a proposal of it, what's happened probably by then, but the show would not be before Christmas. That would be a terrible idea. Yeah, people are gone for the holidays and I don't see that happening. I know this is gonna take some time, so
Okay,
yeah,
I have no problem with the concept.
okay,
It's just the timing.
sure.
I agree.
The
Yeah.
timing concerns me because
Yeah, and I'm not asking for town staff, you know, commitment at this point,
We would have
time-wise.
to help with overseeing the building and walking up and, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, once we get a date and
Right.
all of that stuff, but at this point, it's literally just talking to our community and reaching out to them and seeing how they receive it. Yeah. That's the last thing I had. If nobody else has any other topics, then, motion to adjourn?
I mean,
Second? Second. All right, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:28 PM.
I guess we can do it today. You don't have to do it for
Don't let come in your office. I think
Yeah.
They're never printed in like that. Oh, that's good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
They are, they're on the.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I bought him a glowing light that says hashtag boss. I was like, you're bringing it with you.
So
Yeah, and that way we're gonna.
Oh, all these maps are that should be on the treasury.
It was sitting there the other day, right? No, Tino.
We are so there, but it's not even fun. Like, it's going down.
What's that? I'm relatively, not very, I'm relatively new, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna have to ask Roman if you can check down for me. I am really something out of here.
I really need to get out of here. Get those offices. Slow. If you want to move the chairs out of the way in the middle, like we did last time.
And the microphone is water.
I'm like horrible, I'm like stalking my house. Oh, they're taking pictures, so I can get in there.
Alright, y'all come down. Come on, guys. Everybody shift that way a little bit. Shift that way. Offset. Okay, come in a little bit. I'm just trying to get you guys in a little bit. Dan, I'm sorry, I forgot to get you.
It's my fault, because I always mess it up.
That's what I'm gonna blame. Try. Well, everyone else is all in.
I'm on you. I'm on.
There we go. Twin still looks mean, but that's okay. You're always serious, aren't you, Twin? I will get for you in the next, it's probably Monday or Tuesday.
It's over. Do you want to do you thank you? Good luck.
I have your email.
Wherever you go.
I can send it to you. You're welcome.
I'm just tired of looking at
Right, no. I had to tell you, you were more.
Oh, no, I'm not going to. And I found out Gary is in West Virginia.
I know.
In a place called.
I know. I will see you later.
Sorry for right now.
I got to zip up your door.
Okay, I'm spilling Coke on my packet.
Under like less than makes this place look like a.
I can't believe you.
Where are you going?
I'm not actually saying that right now. I was talking about this over time.
Okay, hold on, let me turn the video off first, and then I'll.